For middle powers such as Canada, diplomacy is an essential part of the foreign policy toolkit. And that's certainly been true as the federal government has worked to try to keep COVID vaccine shipments flowing out of the European Union. So, once Canadians have sufficient supply, should Ottawa leverage what's expected to be a robust surplus to advance other non-pandemic related international objectives? With us to consider that in Waterloo, Ontario, Bessma Momani, Professor of Political Science at the University of Waterloo and a Senior Fellow at CIGI, the Centre for International Governance Innovation. And in Woodbridge, Ontario, Erica Di Ruggiero, Associate Professor of Global Health and Director of the Centre for Global Health at the University of Toronto's Dalla Lana School of Public Health. And it's good to have you two back with us here on TVO tonight. Let's just start, if we can, Bessma, with the basics. What is vaccine diplomacy?
Well, vaccine diplomacy is, as it sounds, really, it's countries using vaccine supply either as manufacturers or perhaps even as donors to give to countries that they want to influence, countries that they want to have better relations with. And it's really seen as a soft power tool that countries can use to open new markets, perhaps, or just reinforce good relations.
So, Erica, the suggestion here seems to be that you would share vaccine for more than just altruistic reasons. There's a bit of an underlying foreign policy motive here. Fair to say?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say. I think vaccines are not just a health issue, but they're an equity issue, a global solidarity issue, but they're a political and economic one. And these are some of the issues that we need to debate when we think about diplomacy.
And following up, Erica, I presume that the people in Ottawa are debating significantly right now whether Canada wants to adopt this, and if so, how deeply they want to adopt this. What's your view on that?
Well, I would argue they've already adopted it, and they're actually exercising what I would consider vaccine diplomacy. They were actually an early and vocal champion of vaccine diplomacy. They were one of the first to contribute to something called COVAX. And COVAX is actually a partnership between governments and manufacturers of vaccines. And the aim was to actually support the development and manufacturing of those vaccines for all countries. It has a number of benefits, including the ability to exchange and transfer vaccine doses that can be put to better use elsewhere. And this is particularly important as COVID-19 variants are emerging. So I would argue that Ottawa has already been practicing vaccine diplomacy.
Bessma, what's your view as to whether or not we're already neck deep in it?
I think we are. There's been some stumbles along the way, which I'm sure we'll talk about in terms of the optics of how we've done it. But I think all countries that have capacity, either as producers or as just developed countries that have the financial means, are engaging in this in their own way. The big players, of course, I would say are China and India. They're the ones really sort of getting a lot of global attention for their their vaccine diplomacy. And certainly, in some cases, they're competing against each other for the same countries to really kind of gain influence in them. So it's a very, very interesting international relations issue as well as obviously a global health one.
Well, follow up, if you would, Bessma. Which countries or regions of the world do you think we are particularly trying to influence with our vaccine diplomacy?
Well, I think quite simply, you have to look at where our foreign aid has gone before. It really is a great predictor of where we want to influence. Now, I do have to point out that most of our kind of contribution is through this COVAX mechanism, as my colleague noted, because I think this is where we think we're going to do most good. So we've really done our job in sort of putting it through the international organizations like the WHO and the COVAX mechanism, which is really the right way to do it. But I think you just have to follow where the money is. Where are we sort of contributing our foreign aid dollars? It's in many developing countries. Of course, Latin America is an important market for us, economically. So we're going to donate there, and certainly parts of East Asia and Africa as well.
Erica, you mentioned the word equity earlier, and I want to follow up on that. Do you believe that Canada either can or should use vaccine diplomacy to, for example, promote gender equity in some countries that don't follow it as closely as perhaps we'd like them to?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And as I think many people know, the Prime Minister actually made this a key part of his political platform back in 2015 as part of the feminist agenda. But I would argue that gender is much broader than just vaccine diplomacy. But the implications for vaccines to women are really particular. For example, women here at home and globally are more vulnerable in health terms during periods of crisis. And this is particularly true during COVID-19. One of the reasons is that women make up more than 70% of the health workforce and therefore are at greater risk. The second reason is the kind of roles that women play. They often are essential workers, they are PSWs. And as we heard back in March last year, if we can dial the clock back that far, female-dominated service sector jobs were among the first to be affected in the first wave of the pandemic because many of these jobs were precarious because they're part-time, they lack benefits such as paid sick leave, which is a hotly debated issue right now in Ontario, and job security. So of course, access to vaccines for women is a particularly important issue here at home, but also globally.
Bessma, can I hear you on that too?
Yeah, of course, I completely agree. And I think the other aspect of this is that, of course, women's organizations are really grassroots organizations. And what they can do is obviously raise public awareness. I think we have to point out there's still a lot of vaccine skepticism. I mean, it's not just a developing country problem. And I just heard a poll, a YouGov poll that noted that, in France, 48% of people are still very skeptical about even taking the vaccine. So we do need to raise public awareness, public education, and women's organizations, being grassroots organizations, knowing their communities, knowing their families are really important. They help in countering disinformation. So the more we can get these types of grassroots organizations through a bottom-up effort, the better we'll be in terms of getting that kind of vaccine distribution that's needed to really stamp out this virus.
Erica, can I pursue this just one more time? And that is, I want to make sure I got a better understanding of this. I don't think there's anybody in Canada who would say, for example, men ought to get a shot before women, and who cares about equity? Men are more important to society, and therefore, ... No one would take that view in Canada. But there may be places in this world where that is the view. And do you think the government of Canada ought to use vaccine diplomacy to try to stamp that out?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to be really careful that we don't preach to the developing world what may be also issues here at home. And as my colleague expressed, while we wouldn't necessarily suggest that, we've also already seen attempts by men to jump the queue and get vaccines in northern part of Canada as one example. And so I think that the issue is here at home as well. I guess the other issue has to do with trust in institutions, as my colleague alluded to. And so I think it's really important to build capacity for adoption of vaccines because we can't rest on our laurels. Vaccine hesitancy is here, and part of the reason is trust in institutions who tend to deliver them.
Well, Bessma, admittedly, I'm doing a little bit of spitballing here, so help me out if I'm really off base here. But for example, could Canada use vaccine diplomacy if it wanted to mediate in a long-standing dispute, for example, in the Middle East? I'm not sure how, but do you see a role for it in that circumstance?
Well, you have to be really careful with that, frankly. I mean, you don't want to weaponize the vaccine, so to speak. You don't want to make it a overly political tool, even though I think, frankly, it is in many ways. I mean, I don't think really, and I don't see a Canadian example really effectively to be used in the Middle East, for example. But, think about countries like Nepal or Sri Lanka, where you have China and India very much competing for influence in those two countries. They're doing exactly that. And frankly, the leaders of both Sri Lanka and Nepal are smart enough to actually use China and India against each other to get more and more vaccines. So, there is an opportunity, I think, for countries who are in that sort of geostrategic location and have these, potential superpowers who want their interest. There's absolutely an opportunity to use that against them.
Well, okay, let me try a more realistic example then with you, and that is Joe Biden's administration is just in, right? They've been in for less than a month. Can you imagine a scenario whereby they're trying to get Middle East peace talks back on the rails, where they might, for example, quietly say to the Palestinian delegation, look, if you bend a little bit on this, we'll make sure that your people get X number of vaccinations, et cetera. Does that happen?
It sure could. I mean, I think lots of things happen behind the doors. Let's not sugarcoat this. I'm sure there is that kind of, intervention. I think in the Palestinian territories, absolutely. This is a real, I think, it's gotten a lot of coverage, which is, Israel is obviously put on a pedestal for having such great distribution of the vaccine, but the Palestinian territories have almost gotten nothing. And in fact, there's even reports suggesting that the Israelis have blocked certain vaccines from coming in, specifically the Russian one. So yeah, absolutely, it can be done. And I think that there's even possibility that the Biden administration is using backroom diplomacy to do this. But unfortunately, I think the real overall argument on that, we're diverting a little bit of the subject, is that I don't think the Biden administration really cares too much about the Israel-Palestine conflict. They really want to move on and talk about a whole bunch of other things.
Well, as we will do right now as well, lest we get hijacked into another discussion at this time. Let's come home. We want to play a little clip here. This is Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the Federal New Democrats, on the issue of COVAX, which we've talked about here, this international agreement on how and where to share the vaccine stockpile. And Mr. Singh's view that the federal government's approach to this may not be as tickety-boo as he'd like. Sheldon, the clip if you would.
Canada is the only country in the G7 that is going to access COVAX, which is vaccine supply meant for developing countries. How did the Liberal government let things get so bad?
Our government will never apologize for doing everything in our power to get Canadians vaccinated as quickly as possible. COVAX has always been part of Canada's procurement strategy, and the COVAX mechanism is working precisely as designed. We've been clear from the start. No one will be safe until everyone is. We're focused on getting Canadians vaccinated while making sure the rest of the world is vaccinated too.
Erica, first, can you weigh in on this and how you think we've handled the whole COVAX foofara?
Well, I think it took a lot of people by surprise that they decided to dip into the stockpile. But technically, they could access it. Membership has its advantages. But I think this recent move was actually political, but it was seen by the global community as really a blow to efforts to promote vaccine equity. The recent statement that was made by the WHO Director General, Dr. Tedros, just reinforced the importance of vaccine equity. And I think we have to go back to what COVAX was intended to do. I mean, it was intended to establish access to vaccines for essential health workers in poorest countries, and also up to approximately 20% of the general population for each country. However, 20% is a bit of a low bar and a low ambition, and so it's not going to get us very far. And I think it speaks to a bit of shortism that tends to plague these kinds of agreements. But we really need to do a better job at ensuring that the 92 low and middle income countries who are eligible to be supported by COVAX do get their access. And if we see, economic and power plays like the one we've just seen, low and middle income countries run the risk of being left behind in accessing COVID vaccines. I would argue that we're only as strong as our weakest link, so we have to do better.
Now, having said that, Bessma, I believe the finance minister was being accurate in her comments when she said, as one of the participating founding members of COVAX, we're allowed to dip into that for our own personal needs. Now, Canada took it on the chin around the world a bit for her saying that out loud, but it's true, isn't it?
It is true. Absolutely. That is our right. But I think, this is really almost an ethical question and an optics question, right? We've already seen suggestions that we have purchased 3 to 4 times our population. So the optics of this looks like we're hoarding, right? And there's this limited supply. There's limited production of these really sought after vaccines. So it's a bit kind of awkward for Canada, which really sort of tries to sort of portray this very progressive international role. Of course, yes, we have a right to use it, and countries like New Zealand and Singapore, which are also developed countries, are using it as well, and they're dipping into COVAX. But the optics here is the real issue. And even though we have the right, I think that, it just kind of, it looked a little awkward for us, again, because we stand on this so-called pedestal, and at the same time, we've already purchased or already ordered, 3 to 4 times of our own population.
Can you tell whether or not this has damaged our standing in the international order?
Well, I think, it depends on how many people are, know the news, so to speak, and following Canadian politics. I don't think so. But I think certainly in the halls of international organizations like the WHO, Gavi, which sort of runs COVAX, I'm sure it doesn't look good. And I'm sure that there is some, rumblings of, hey, this is not right. This is not Canadian-esque in many ways in terms of our image as well.
There is, Erica, kind of an irony here, in as much as the Trudeau government's kind of taking it on the chin at home for bending over backwards too far to ensure that others got supply at the risk of people here at home not getting theirs. And yet the fact is they've stepped into COVAX and taken what legitimately they're entitled to take, which may make them look rough on the world stage, but may ingratiate them to the folks here at home. There's a bit of you can't win in this situation, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. They're caught between a rock and a hard place, but I think that's the challenge really that governments are faced with. But as my colleague said, Canada actually has secured the highest number of doses per capita than any other country. They still continue with the rhetoric to be publicly committed to COVAX. But the reality is that there are many countries that still have not administered a single dose. And we can't actually wait until all Canadians are vaccinated without continually progressively giving access to our reserves of vaccine. We need to really share our vaccine allocation. This may be a short-term gain politically inside the country, but we may suffer for it long-term gain because the pandemic is here to stay for a little while longer.
Unfortunately, I think you're right. Let me read this to see if this suggests an over-reliance on globalization for Canada at the moment. Sheldon, can we get this graphic up here, please? Canada was criticized at the end of last year for buying up 5 times the supply it needs to cover its population, but it seems it wasn't positioned for priority delivery. That's partly because the country decided to invest in vaccines from European factories, afraid that the U.S., under Donald Trump, would issue export bans. It turned out to be a bad bet. European factories are struggling with supply, and recently it has been the EU, not the U.S., that has been threatening export bans, so reported the BBC earlier this month. Bessma, we are apparently the only G7 country that does not have at-home manufacturing capabilities for these vaccines. Do you have any insight into why and I gather it was not for lack of trying by members of the federal government, but they apparently were unable to convince any big pharma companies to establish any domestic manufacturing here in Canada. What's the story there?
Yeah, I'm not sure that latter part's very accurate, but I do think it's going to be the headline that comes out of this is really our overdependence on other countries. We saw this in the race for masks, right? For PPE. I think we should have been very much aware a year ago that we will be needing, vaccine supply. And of course, we wouldn't know that, for example, it would come from this really sophisticated and new technology, mRNA, which I think is a real kind of specialized way of producing vaccines that we don't necessarily have. But the UK, for example, in 10 months retrofitted their own production facilities to produce those vaccines. So I just don't think that it's, accurate to say we couldn't do it. I think we are going to have really important conversations in this country about sort of unfettered globalization and our view that, we should be dependent on other countries. We don't depend on other countries for the most important things that are geostrategic and of national security. And I think we need to have an honest conversation. We did so with drugs, which we've done before in the past, and we need to do the same thing, I think, for vaccines in the future.
Yeah, Erica, can I get you on that? How bizarre is it that Canada can't we're the only G7 country that can't, at home, manufacture vaccines that we need to protect our population?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't surprised on the one hand, but I would say that my colleague has mentioned the example from the UK. We can actually learn some really important lessons about how they did this in the context of COVID. But I guess there are new opportunities, as we build back better from this pandemic. And that is, for example, we have a new leader of the World Trade Organization, the first ever woman from Nigeria. And so Canada, in addition to building its at-home capacity, could also influence trade rules and bring in considerations of health, labor, gender, and environment. And so it could be an influencer in that respect as well.
All right. In which case, in our last few minutes here, let's just see if we can figure out what the key considerations are as we try to balance all of the different things that we've talked about so far. Erica, what do you think are the key things that need to be taken into account?
Well, I mean, I think as we've already discussed, countries like Canada have to really balance their global commitments with their domestic interest. You know, on the one hand, the Canadian government's it's in their best interest to take care of its own citizens. And I would argue that if there was one key thing is that when we continue to do our vaccine rollout, we need to be thinking about the most vulnerable. We've already seen some starts in vaccinating seniors in long-term care facilities, but also essential workers and racialized communities need to be taking priority. So to me, that would be one key thing that we have to bear in mind.
And Bessma, how do we sort of find that very tricky balancing point between vaccine nationalism? You know, we do want to be kind of at the forefront in the world of having our people inoculated and even maybe manufacturing it here at home, a balance between vaccine nationalism and vaccine diplomacy.
It's a great question. It's so many ways a very ethical one, right? I mean, I think as a taxpayer, I want every Canadian vaccinated before I give a single dose to any other third world country. But at the same time, from a rational, ethical perspective, why should a healthy Canadian 20-year-old get vaccinated before an elderly person in a developing country or a frontline care worker? I mean, that's the kind of, ethical debate that we'll be sort of pondering. I think it really is going to be an important issue. There's going to be lots of very interesting conversations coming from this, including the power of big pharma, IP rights. There's going to be, I think, a push eventually. I know India and South Africa are doing this, for example, to WTO about, allowing generics to produce this vaccine. I mean, there's going to be a host of really important questions. And as Erica pointed, in the Build Back Better mantra, I think we're going to have a conversation about the rules of trade in the global system.
Erica, Bessma has just asked a great question. Why should a 20-year-old Canadian whose chances of really suffering adverse health effects from this thing are very low on the hierarchy, why should they get the shot ahead of somebody in a developing country who's dealing with sick people all day long, who might be a healthcare worker and really desperately needs it in order to promote health in that country halfway around the world? Who gets to make that call in Canada? That's a hard one.
Yeah, that's a really tough question. I don't know if we have enough time to answer that, but I would say it is, and just to restate what my colleague said, this is an ethical issue that has to be debated at global forum through bilateral and multilateral agreements. Again, we know how this pandemic started. And we've been hearing that we are entering an age of pandemics. So we need to figure this out fast. And it can't just be a single country approach to this.
Yeah, Bessma, I guess on the one hand, the government of Canada is obligated to its own citizens first. But on the other hand, it does want to project lest I steal a phrase from 5 or 6 years ago, it does want to project sunny ways onto the world and show that we can be a leader in other ways as well. If you had to make the call, who gets that shot first? The 20-year-old kid from Don Mills or a healthcare worker in Nigeria?
I think the logical answer, frankly, even though as I said, as a taxpayer, I want every Canadian citizen vaccinated first, is still to look at the most vulnerable internationally. And part of that is, frankly, if we're going to stamp out this virus, and I'm talking very rationally here, and seeing those new variants coming every day from the UK and South Africa, the truth of the matter is we need to stamp this out fast. These variants are very, very dangerous, and the variants are happening because it's mutating, like all viruses will. So we need to stamp this out. And the way to stamp it out is by taking care of the most vulnerable, people who are most exposed. And I think that really does mean that we have to have an international focus. The virus knows no borders. That's the truth of the matter.
Erica, last question to you. How do we go about building Canada's capacity in global health diplomacy?
Well, I think this is an area that our school's trying to take on. We argued a few months ago that Canada's capacity could be strengthened in global health diplomacy in order to ensure it's a relevant player at those global forums. And so as a School of Public Health, we've actually launched the first ever executive course. I mean, we are an education institution and we have our first cohort started. So it's the beginning of trying to build that capacity.
Wonderful. My thanks to both of you for coming on to TVO tonight and sharing your views about this. Erica Di Ruggiero, Dalla Lana School of Public Health at the University of Toronto, Bessma Momani, the University of Waterloo, and the Centre for International Governance Innovation. And Bessma, we can, I guess, let the cat out of the bag. We're going to see you back on this channel tomorrow night as well, as you're going to be participating in our Democracy Agenda show with the Toronto Star tomorrow night. So look forward to seeing you then as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.